Jesus warned in Revelation chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13, verse 12 through 14. The lamb-like beast, which we know is the United States of America. Verse 12 says that the United States exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. We know the first beast is the papacy. The United States of America will stretch their hands across the gulf, will clasp hands with the papal power, and the United States will be foremost in the earth to tell the world to honor a tradition of Rome, which we know is Sunday. But the method the United States will use, in verses 13 and 14, we read, "And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast." The United States, in order to bring all of this earth, and possibly the very elect, to embrace sun worship and lose their souls for eternity, they will use the power of deception. And deceiving somebody is simply saying, this is the way it is, this is true, when in actuality it is a total lie. And I want to illustrate it for you. Deception. As an 8th grader, junior high school, I was a heathen. I was a quarterback for a little football team. And my team, we had this one play that we would trick the opponents every time. We would deceive them. And this is what we did. I had a flanker out over here on my right side. I had 2 running backs. My one running back to my left, he was the fastest guy in our school and in the whole county. He could run a 100-yard dash in under 10 seconds. That's moving for an 8th grader. I'd call hut 1. And as soon as I said hut 1, my flanker would start in motion coming this way. When I hit hut 3, I got the ball from the center and I turned, threw it to my flanker, and we started running around this end like this, like an in sweep. We did that play twice. Okay? Same play, identical everything 2 times. The 3rd time, 3rd down, I say hut 1, and guess what happened? My flanker started in motion. And you know what the other team thought? He's going to throw the ball to that flanker, and they're going to run around this end again. And so the other team thought, we've got him. We know exactly what they're going to do. Deception. Watch how it worked. Hut 1, he starts in motion. Hut 2, hut 3, I got the ball. I turn and I throw it to the guy, and he starts coming around this end. And we're all running this way. But my fast halfback over here, he didn't go with us this time. You know what he did? He took 1 step this way, and then he went like this. And my flanker, this time when he's got the ball in his hands, he put it on his back hip. And so as the running back comes around this way, guess what happens to the ball? It ends up in the halfback's hands. And he has the ball like this going around this side. Guess where the opposing team defense was? They were all over there. You know why? They were deceived. They were totally duped. And according to Revelation chapter 13, That's exactly what the United States is going to use. They're going to say, this is where the problem is, this is where the trouble is, and you know what? It's going to be all the way over there. You see, right now we're being told, Osama bin Laden is an awful terrorist. You know what, folks? If you believe that, you're just like the defense that's following my flanker over there without the ball. That's a deception. So the United States is going to use deception to get the world to bow down to Sunday worship. Matthew chapter 24, 4 times Jesus warned. 4 times. If he said it once, we might say, maybe he said it might happen, but maybe it won't. But he said it 4 times. Watch out. Watch out. Don't go for the end run. Don't go for it. 4 times. Matthew 24:4, it says, And Jesus answered and said to them, Take heed that no man deceive you. Verse 5, For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Verse 11, Many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. Verse 24, For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. 4 times Jesus warned us. Watch out, because deception is going to run rampant at the end of Earth's history. Now, can somebody answer me a question? A famous world leader this week met in the White House with the President of the United States. Can somebody tell me the name of that famous world leader that met with President Bush? Ariel Sharon. And where is Ariel Sharon the leader of? Israel. And why were they meeting together? What were we told the reason was for them meeting together? To try to find peace in the Middle East. Did they find it? They didn't find it, did they? Failed again. Now, from what I understand, Ariel Sharon had to leave Washington early to go back to the Middle East. Why? What happened? There were some suicide bombers, weren't there, Eddie? Blowing up. And Yasser Arafat, when he was quarantined in that building, you remember? And everything kind of quieted down a little bit. And then as soon as he got out, what happened? Everything started again. And so now, as Americans, we're being programmed to say, that Yasser Arafat, he's a bad guy, but Ariel Sharon, he's fighting for peace, and so is the president. Isn't that what we're being told? Now, John Swinton told us, and Revelation 13 told us, and Matthew 24 told us, that you better watch out because the press might lie to you. Is it possible that we're being lied to? Is it possible that Ariel Sharon and George Bush and Yasser Arafat are playing a game? Is that possible? You say, you better have some evidence to back that up. If you've got the time, I've got the evidence. What I want to do with you this afternoon for a little while is I want to go back. I want to show you from history. I want to show you exactly why there's war in the Middle East today. And I want to show you today why we continue to hear about George Bush, about Colin Powell, about Dick Cheney, about Yasser Arafat, about Ariel Sharon, about Bethlehem, and about how all these things, how these leaders are trying to find peace in the Middle East. And for some reason, it's just not happening. There's a reason why it's not happening. There's a reason why. And I want you to watch real carefully this afternoon. And I want to go back to the 3rd century to start what we're going to look at this afternoon. I'm going to be reading a little bit from a comic strip. I guess some people just never grow up, do they? These are a little bit different comic strips than your normal run-of-the-mill. This one's called The Prophet. It's from the Alberto Rivera series, Part 6. By the way, Alberto Rivera was an ex-Jesuit priest. Alberto Rivera died within the last few years. He was poisoned, and he was poisoned by the Jesuit order of the Catholic Church. I believe with all my heart that Alberto Rivera had something to say as far as the Jesuits in world history and in current events is concerned. His theology, I don't agree with a lot of it, but his understanding of history and the Jesuit order was right on the money, and we better listen to it. This is what he says, page 5 of the comic strip The Prophet. He says this: a Jesuit cardinal named Augustine B. showed us how desperately the Roman Catholics wanted Jerusalem at the end of the 3rd century. Because of its religious history and its strategic location, the Holy City was considered a priceless treasure. A scheme had to be developed to make Jerusalem a Roman Catholic city. The great untapped source of manpower that could do this job was the children of Ishmael. The poor Arabs fell victim to one of the most clever plans ever devised by the powers of darkness. According to Alberto Rivera, the Roman Catholic Church wanted Jerusalem at the end of the 3rd century. So by 280s, 290s, in the Christian era, the papacy eyed Jerusalem. They wanted that city for their very own. Now on page 18 of this magazine, Alberto said this: the Vatican desperately wanted Jerusalem because of its religious significance, but was blocked by the Jews. Another problem was the true Christians in North Africa preaching the gospel. Roman Catholicism was growing in power and would not tolerate any opposition. Somehow the Vatican had to create a weapon to eliminate both the Jews and the true Christian believers who refused to accept Roman Catholicism. Looking to North Africa, they saw the multitudes of Arabs as a source of manpower to do their dirty work. So what's the picture that we're painting, that Alberto Rivera paints as an ex-Jesuit? The Catholic Church wanted Jerusalem. They wanted to have the Pope reign from Jerusalem. But they were blocked. There were Jews there. There were Christians there. So what would they do? They saw the Arabs, the Muslims, and they said, we'll use the Muslims to get us Jerusalem. So what did the papacy do? Alberto, page 21. He says this: in their holy book, the Quran, the Muslims regarded Jesus as a prophet. If the Pope was his representative on earth, then he must also be a prophet, which caused the followers of Muhammad to fear and respect the Pope as another holy man. The Pope therefore moved quickly and issued bulls, those are letters, granting the Arab generals permission to invade and conquer the nations of North Africa. The Vatican helped to finance the building of these massive Islamic armies in exchange for 3 special favors. What were those favors? Number 1, eliminate the Jews and Christians. Number 2, protect the Augustinian monks and Roman Catholics. And number 3, conquer Jerusalem for His holiness in the Vatican. So what happened? Did the Islamic forces conquer Jerusalem? Did they drive out the Jews and Christians? Yes, they did. This is what happened. Once again, Alberto, page 22. As time passed, the power of Islam became tremendous. Jews and Christians were slaughtered, and Jerusalem fell into their hands. It was time for the payback. The Pope asked for Jerusalem. But by now the Arab generals felt the exhilaration of victory everywhere they went. They felt nothing could stand in their way. The Pope's carefully laid plans began to backfire and then crumbled before his eyes. Now, how many of you of late have seen a picture of Jerusalem with the Dome of the Rock? How many of you have seen that? Do you know what the Dome of the Rock represents? It represents the power of Islam in Jerusalem. Because what happened was, after the Pope had financed the Muslim armies to take over Jerusalem, the Muslim generals said, "We're not going to give you Jerusalem." Now, who do you think was upset after that happened? The Pope was furious. Furious. And when a Pope gets furious, what does he do? When the Pope got furious with Martin Luther, what did he do? When the Pope was furious with the Waldenses, what did he do? They are anathematized, and then they are slaughtered. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like a 2-year-old child that's throwing a temper tantrum, doesn't it? You tell a 2-year-old, "No, you can't have your 16th piece of pie at this meal." And what does the child do? The child falls on the ground and cries and screams and throws their hands in the air as though they're now going to get their piece of pie. That's what the Pope did. "You're not going to give me Jerusalem?" So he throws his temper tantrums. And do you know how long the temper tantrums went on? For centuries. For centuries. And do you know what those were called? The wars that were fought over Jerusalem? They were called crusades. But you know what? U.S. News and World Report. April 8th, 2002. U.S. News. The Crusades. The truth about the epic clash between Christianity and Islam. Christianity. The followers of Christ Is that what a Christian does? Folks, whenever you hear somebody say that the Roman Catholic Church is Christian, that's a lie. That's a lie. And so U.S. News and World Report is telling us that Catholicism is Christian. Do you know who is behind U.S. News and World Report? The Vatican. I noticed in the articles that they did say some things that they couldn't deny, that are historical fact, and I want to read it to you. This is on page 38. It says this: you're likely to read about Richard the Lionhearted, the leader of the Catholic or European expedition to retake Jerusalem. So why were the Crusades fought? It was to take control of Jerusalem from the Muslims so that the Pope could get what he wanted. That's why the Crusades were fought. And according to this magazine and according to history, the Crusades went on for several centuries. Centuries. Do you know how many people's lives were taken? How many homes were devastated? How many people lost their dad or their brother or their uncle in the Crusades? It was total butchery. Why? Why were people dying? Because the Pope had to have Jerusalem. That's why. Another statement on page 38 of the same magazine, it says, from their beginnings in 1095, the Crusades inspired more passion than anyone expected. The idea of an expedition to reclaim Jerusalem from the unbelievers seized the imagination of people from all social classes. So U.S. News and World Report understands very well exactly why the Crusades were fought. The Muslims did not give Jerusalem to the Pope, so now the Pope's going to go in and destroy families for centuries to take over Jerusalem. Now, if you go back in history for 1,260 years, from 538 to 1798, you will find that the papacy did not get their goal. They never got Jerusalem because Jerusalem was in the hands of the Muslim Turks for centuries. So throughout the 1,260-year period from 538 to 1798, they didn't get it. But things began to change. And in this U.S. News and World Report, page 39, they tell us this. And this is a fact of history. In 1917, a British general by the name of Sir Edmund Allenby marched into Jerusalem and captured Jerusalem from the Turks. Now, do you know what Edmund Allenby said as they marched into Jerusalem and took it away from the Muslim Turks? Listen to what he said. He said, "Today the wars of the Crusaders are completed." What did he mean by that? He simply meant this. The Crusades didn't do it. They didn't finish the work of driving the Muslim out of Jerusalem. But now we, the British, working for the Pope of Rome, we have finished the crusade. And going on, it says, and the British press celebrated his victory with cartoons of Richard the Lionhearted, looking down at Jerusalem above the caption that stated, "At last, my dream come true." So the wars of the Crusaders are complete in 1917. Did the Pope then take over Jerusalem in 1917? No. Because the world wouldn't allow for such a bizarre thing as that. But the papacy could begin to work things through in Jerusalem to bring it about whereby the world would cry out and say, we must give Jerusalem to the Pope. He is our only hope for peace in Israel. So what happened? 1917, right after the British conquered Jerusalem, a declaration was made by an English statesman by the name of Arthur James Balfour, in which the British government stated that they would give the land of Israel back to the Jews as their homeland. And the Jews around the world who wanted to go back to Israel could go back, because Israel would now be their home. That's what the Balfour Declaration declared in 1917. In fact, I'll read it to you. This is a letter that Arthur Balfour wrote to Lord Rothschild. And who's behind the Rothschilds? The Jesuit order. I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish aspirations. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. So in 1917, the Balfour Declaration, the British government told Lord Rothschild that Palestine or Israel would be a home for the Jews to go back to. Did the Jews go back? From the records I've studied, about 80,000 Jews went to Israel. How many Jews are in the world? 80,000 is like a drop in the bucket. But a homeland was established. How could the Jewish people be encouraged to go back to Israel? A land was established. Yes, they were, Graham. But the Jews still didn't go back after World War I. They did not go back. And so in between the wars, it was determined that the only way to get the Jews to go back to Israel would be to make things in this world very, very tough on them, and to cause them difficulty, and to create things called concentration camps, and to purchase chemicals and gases from the IG Farben Company, from the hands of Karol Wojtyła, who is now Pope John Paul II, to purchase chemicals and gases from him to put in concentration camps in places like Dachau and Auschwitz and other places, and to make things so awful for the Jews, and to create sympathy all over the world for them, that they would be strongly urged and encouraged to go back home. And so the atrocities of World War II took place. World War II ends. The United Nations, another Jesuit plan for a one-world government to house their one-world religion, was formed in Jesuit-controlled San Francisco. In 1948, Israel was declared to be a sovereign nation. And Cardinal Francis Spellman, who was the instigator of the Kennedy assassination, was the key man in pushing Israel's sovereign nation status. And so Israel becomes a nation, and Jews begin to flock to Israel. And so what's happened ever since the Jews have flocked to Israel since 1948? Well, let's see. They've had 4 wars against Egypt, and they've warred against Syria, and they've had trouble and war with the Palestinians and Yasser Arafat, and they've had war with the Lebanese to their north. And so in coming home to Israel, it's been a bloodbath. It's been a bloodbath. Why? The Catholic Church was behind Adolf Hitler gassing the Jews in World War II. And the Catholic Church was behind Francis Spellman making them a sovereign state in 1948. How do you put those two things together? Did the Catholic Church have a change of heart after World War II and feel so bad about what they had done that they said, we've got to do something nice for these people? Is that what happened? No. They killed them in World War II, and after the war they thought, hey, if we can get them all in one place, then we can really have a bloodbath. And you know what? Since 1948, if you go back and look at the history of Israel, that's exactly what has happened. The Catholic Church has detested the Jewish race from the very beginning of Roman Catholic Church history. And I'll tell you why. It's from the book The Vatican, Moscow, Washington Alliance by Avro Manhattan, pages 169 and 170. It says this: it's important for some to recognize the religious nature of the communist Zionist Catholic configuration. Although deliberately silenced in public pronouncements, behind the Zionist banner there was to be found the ancient messianic hope for the coming of a global theocracy. It was to be a theocracy in which Jehovah was to be king. The specter of the creation of such a theocracy has haunted the inner chambers of the Catholic Church from her earliest inception, and still is a dominant fear. Now, what is Avro Manhattan saying? He's simply saying this: within the mentality of the Jewish race is the idea that someday the Jews, at the advent of the Messiah, they will set up a global theocracy. Now, how does the Catholic Church feel about that? The Catholic Church is scared to death. Why? Because they want to set up the global theocracy. So the Catholic Church looks at the Jews and says, if we can annihilate the Jews from the face of the earth, then who can the Messiah come to? There won't be any Jews left. In Vatican eyes, the millenarian yearning for a global Hebrew theocracy represents a deadly threat to the eschatological teachings of the Catholic Church. When translated into political terms, such a view spells not only rivalry, but implacable enmity. The Catholic Church wants to destroy the Jews from off the face of the earth. Now let's raise a question. If the Jesuit order, as we have stated many, many times, is controlling the United States government today, then why does the United States defend Israel? Why? We'll answer that. Here's another question. On September 17th, Monday, USA Today newspaper. In U.S. News and World Report, page 39, they quote this. George W. Bush, September 17th, he stated that our administration is preparing a crusade against terrorism. What did George Bush mean by that? Is he an uneducated man? Does he not understand the word crusade and what it means? Of course he does. Then what was George Bush meaning when he said, we're preparing a crusade against terrorism? People are dying in the Middle East. Young men and young women are attaching bombs to their bodies, going into crowded areas, cafes or buses or subways or crowded streets, and blowing themselves up, and other people are dying. Why? To fight for Islam? To fight for Allah? Why is it that George Bush, Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Ariel Sharon, and Yasser Arafat, as 5 grown men, cannot figure out how to have peace in the Middle East? Why? And why are we, as consumers of current events, why are we continually fed on the front page of every Orlando Sentinel, the front pages of major news magazines, the front story on news stations on television, and the major topic on talk shows on radio? Why are we being bombarded with the horrible things that are happening in Israel? I think there's a simple answer to all those questions. From the 3rd century, the Catholic Church wanted to go into Jerusalem and rule the world from Israel. They first used the Arab generals to take it for them. And the Arab generals turned the tables. And the Islamic peoples controlled Jerusalem for centuries. They fought crusades to take over, to retake Jerusalem, and failed. And then in 1917, a state is set apart. And then atrocities are allowed in World War II. And one war after another has gone on until now today we just watch bloodshed after bloodshed over there. I think there's all a very simple reason for why it's happening today, that you will never read in the newspaper. John Paul still wants Jerusalem. The black general, the Jesuit general, still wants Jerusalem to be in the hands of the papacy from which he wants to rule the world. And so today, the world leaders who are all in the hands of the Jesuit general and the press that's in the hands of the Jesuit general, they are making it look like it's impossible to have peace in the Middle East. And they will continue to allow it to go on until it becomes clear that public opinion is so upset and so sad about what's going on in the Middle East that the world will begin to cry out for a peacemaker to come to Jerusalem to bring peace to that troubled region. And since George Bush and Powell and Cheney and Sharon and Arafat failed, they certainly won't be asked to go, will they? But can you think of somebody in our world today that is looked upon as the great peacemaker? The man who has traveled the world wide and brought peace to troubled situations? Who is considered the great man of peace in our world today? The Antichrist of Revelation chapter 17. The Pope himself. And so right now, the whole world is being conditioned. And the very elect are being conditioned to believe that this awful situation needs a peacemaker to come to Israel. And mark my words, I'm not a prophet, but I understand history a little bit. And now, from what we've studied today, we both understand history a little bit. And you know and I know that when the papacy and the Black Pope, the Jesuit general, says, we're going to kill as many people as we need to, but we're going to take over that area, they mean business. But I believe that it's going to happen sometime in the very near future, that the Pope will come to Jerusalem as the great peacemaker, and for a very, very brief moment, peace will come to that city and that area. But it will only be to bring in and usher in the coming. And it's not the second coming. Can you think of somebody else who the world is longing to see? Everybody's longing for Christ to come, aren't they? And we know that before Christ comes, there's going to be somebody else that will come impersonating Christ. We live, folk, in an awesome time. My prayer today is that we will pray that God will give us eyesap to understand what's really happening out there. And the only way to rightly understand current events and future events is in light of the past. And don't ever forget the